Sean Strickland looks to defend his middleweight championship for the first time this weekend at UFC 297 in Toronto at the Scotiabank Arena. Sean Strickland meets Dricus Du Plessis in his first title defense, and a very interesting matchup and a pretty solid main card all around. Really, the last Canadian card, I can't remember the number, but man, it was filled with some really good fights, and to see some of these fighters back on the card representing for Canada is cool to see. I think the main card is going to be really good. I'm going to get into PFL versus Bellator as well a little bit in this one, but mainly going over UFC 297. And so let's get right into it. Again, DDP versus Sean Strickland, as they will face each other in the main event. Raquel Pennington versus Mayra Bueno Silva in the co-main event. Neil Magny meets Mike Malott, and Chris Curtis versus Marc-Andre Barriault, as well as Arnold Allen returning for the first time since he lost to Max Holloway against Movsar Evloev. I probably butchered that, so just 145 is the bout, so we'll get right into the main card. Brad Katona, also the winner of the last Ultimate Fighter, is on the prelims. He's the very last fight on the prelims. Representing, he's got a Canadian flag next to his name. I thought he was from Ireland, but maybe I am wrong. It doesn't say exactly on the page. It just has the flag next to his name. Anyways, so getting into the main card, Arnold Allen coming off of the loss, of course, to Max Holloway in his last fight. That was all the way back in April, so it's almost been a year since we've seen Arnold Allen in the octagon. And I think this fight is going to be an interesting one, depending on if Evloev can get him to the ground. He comes in at 17-0. I think is really going to be the key. He's averaging almost 5 takedowns a fight in the UFC, which is pretty significant right there. Considering he's only been in 3-round fights, and facing Arnold Allen, he's going to want to come in and put on a show and show he's still should be considered amongst the top of the featherweight. Evloev trying to definitely break into that top and upper part of the main card. Of the division. So I'm going to go ahead and go with Arnold Allen in this one. I think he bounces back. He's the underdog in this fight. As long as he can keep the fight standing, he's got a great stand-up game. And I think that he's going to be able to win this one. So Arnold Allen is my first prediction. Going on to Chris Curtis versus Marc-Andre Barriault. Barriault had a great fight in his last fight, and I don't know off the top of my head who he fought. But again, on that last Canadian card, and it was wild. The crowd was wild. I think the crowd is going to be way into it tonight as well. Just because they showed they've been mad hype at the press conferences, and Sean Strickland has been riling the crowd up. Really, everybody kind of at the press conference trying to really get the crowd into it. So I think it's going to be an exciting night of fights. I'm going to go here with Chris Curtis. He is the favorite at the moment, and I think that he's going to get the job done. He's been around forever, 40 fights, and I think that he's going to be able to do what it takes to win this fight. Neil Magny versus Mike Malott, and this one right here I think is really that one of those kind of last-ditch efforts for Neil Magny to kind of stay, I don't want to say relevant, but really in this part of the card and part of the rankings at 170 pounds. He's kind of on the downslide, of course, coming off the loss to Ian Gary in his last fight. I got to go with Mike Malott, though. I think he's coming off of a great fight in his last fight, and I think Malott has a lot to prove. And I think, Neil Magny kind of being in that gatekeeper status, I think he finally, is starting to get kind of passed by the next generation of martial artists. And, some guys just don't do that. Talking about Jim Miller. Jim Miller announced for UFC 300. And, crazy to see that guy is still going. I mean, I was in, high school, and that dude had been in the UFC for a little bit, I feel like. So Co-main event of the evening is, of course, Raquel Pennington versus Mayra Bueno Silva. And I do think they were kind of trying to hype it up, kind of talking trash back and forth at the press conference. Kind of seemed a little forced to a point. But nonetheless, trying to get the crowd hyped up and everybody excited for this fight. And maybe Sean Strickland's words, I can't remember exactly what he said, but, Sean Strickland was just, he said, you want to see lions fight, not lionesses, I think, or something to that effect. And I think it was Rocky that was asked about that. I seen Tatiana Suarez had commented on an Instagram post saying that next time she sees Sean Strickland, she's going to have words for him as they train together. But I think this is an exciting fight. I mean, Rocky's always in exciting fights, and I think Bueno Silva really, brings that finishing rate. She's been great in the UFC, and I think she's going to be a little bit too much for Rocky to handle. I don't know if she gets the finish. Rocky is hard to finish, so I don't know if she gets the finish. But I think that her skills are just going to be a little bit too much for Pennington in this fight. I think Bueno Silva moves on. This is a title fight, for the vacant belt. So Rocky getting that chance, and I think that does add a little bit of a dynamic to it, just because Pennington has to know this is her last chance at winning this bantamweight title. I think she's had at least one shot. She had the shot against Amanda Nunes, of course, and it was a tough fight to watch. Amanda Nunes really beat her up pretty good, and she just showed that heart that she has. So she's never gonna quit. And this is probably going to be that last chance to win, but I think Mayra Bueno Silva maybe will bring in, kind of usher in that new blood to this division, and being at the top of it will be interesting to see kind of the challengers that line up and what we see next. But as they've been saying all week, Rocky's fought everybody, so I would not be shocked at all if she does win the belt. She's a plus 40 underdog versus a minus 170 favorite and Bueno Silva. So I got Bueno Silva going over in this one and capturing the vacant women's bantamweight title. Into the main event, Sean Strickland versus Dricus Du Plessis. This one pretty much a 50-50 on the betting lines. This is going to be a fight. I am excited for this fight, and I think they've kind of gotten me even more hyped up. I'm excited just because Sean Strickland wants to go to war, and I'm excited for Dricus because he is just dead set on being a world champion. His demeanor and everything coming into this fight is exactly what you want to see out of a challenger. He wants to realize his dream of being the UFC middleweight champion, and it's going to be an interesting fight in the fact that I think Sean Strickland is kind of a one-trick pony in this fight. He is going to bite down on the mouthpiece, he's going to move forward, and he's going to look to land shots on Du Plessis. And I think it can work. The way Du Plessis moves a little bit, kind of moves in this awkward square movement sometimes when he's switching stances and moving around. Notice it in the Whitaker fight. And that could allow, if Strickland can time that right and get his timing down throughout the fight, that can allow Strickland to beat Du Plessis up, I think. And if he catches him while he's kind of midway through that and able to continue, we know his cardio is on point and he looks great. He looks like he's in better condition than he's been in the last couple of years, honestly. I mean, Sean Strickland looks great going in this fight. Looks like he's had a great camp. So I am excited to see that, but at the same time, and this is why I'm gonna pick DDP to win this fight. I think Du Plessis gets that belt, probably sets up that fight against Izzy. And I don't know if he's going to get the finish, but I think at some point he's going to go to the wrestling. I think Strickland at some point will start to get a little bit better of Du Plessis, even though Du Plessis has a great shot, I think, in the stand-up. Just because what began everything against Whitaker was just kind of a straight shot, left hand, that really rocked Whitaker. Pretty much a jab with Whitaker coming in. And if Du Plessis can time Strickland coming in, Strickland's going to be in trouble, I think. So it really depends on who finds their timing and range first. Is it Strickland or is it Du Plessis? I think for Du Plessis, though, even if Strickland does kind of find that range first, Du Plessis averaging almost 3 takedowns a fight with a 50% takedown accuracy. I think Du Plessis can use that, and I know they talked all about, we're gonna stand, we're gonna go to war, nobody wants to see a wrestling match, all that, and that's great. But when it comes down to it, I think Du Plessis has in his mindset that he is going to be a world champion, and that's what he came to do by any means necessary. And it's a fight. It is a mixed martial arts fight. Use every tool you have to win, and I think Du Plessis will do that. I think Du Plessis has more tools, even though I do think Strickland has good wrestling. He's got a better takedown accuracy, although he's averaging less than a takedown a fight, but a 69 or 64.3% takedown accuracy. So he can hold his own wrestling. That's for sure. But once they start, both of them have good cardio. But once they start getting, feeling each other out, getting a little bit of, blood in the arms and maybe kind of clinching up here and there a little bit, I think that Du Plessis will be able to outwork him when it comes to the grappling and the exchanges from striking to grappling. Mixing it all together, putting it all together. I think Du Plessis has a better chance at putting it all together and winning the fight that way, whereas Strickland kind of has this one, direct line to victory, and if he can't get that, and be like the Izzy fight where he just kind of walks Dricus down for 5 rounds, I don't think... And granted, Strickland could finish him. I mean, I don't know if Strickland really has the power like that to obviously have like a one shot, but maybe if he can string some shots together, get Du Plessis, down and, get a stoppage that way, some kind of TKO. I think it's possible, but you have one way towards victory, I think. Whereas Dricus has a few. I think Dricus could probably end up same thing with Strickland, finish him on the feet, get him rocked and, follow up like he did with Whitaker. He could outstrike Strickland for 5 rounds, but he could also mix in those takedowns. And I think Strickland he's so confident in what he did against Izzy, and Izzy obviously being the top striker of the division, that I don't think that's going to allow him to even think about trying to wrestle or anything like that. And, it was the heroic underdog story, right? Him beating Adesanya, and I don't think a ton of times you really see that go well in the follow-up. Granted, he's not facing Adesanya right off the bat, but, it makes me think of Matt Serra. Matt Serra never defended the belt. Bisping never defended the belt. Oh, but you got guys like Weidman. Weidman defended the belt a few times after that. So we'll see. But I think Dricus just has more opportunities to win this fight. So that's why I'm taking Dricus to win this fight. I'll say by decision. Nah, it's hard to say decision, I think, in this fight, man. But I could see it being one of those fights that's still exciting, but by about the 3rd round, Dricus takes over with the wrestling and just kind of beats him up, wears him down. So I'm going to take an unpopular opinion and say 5 rounds, we go the distance, and Dricus gets the dub. He'll be your new middleweight champion. Tonight is what I'm going with. So with that out of the way, UFC 297 should be exciting. Let me know what you think in the comments below as well. Whether it's on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening, let me know what you think. Who's winning tonight in all of these fights? And we'll see. We'll see what happens. So, huge announcement from PFL and Bellator having a huge card in Saudi Arabia. It'll be in the Kingdom Arena, and it'll be PFL versus Bellator. So the PFL champions from this past year will go up against Bellator's champions, which a main event of Renan Ferreira versus Ryan Darth Bader is going to be a huge fight. I'm really excited for the Clay Colliard and AJ McKee fight, and that's the first fight of the night on the main card. That is going to be a pay-per-view. It's going to be the first pay-per-view of the year, as well as Yoel Romero versus Thiago Santos at 205. I think is going to be a very exciting fight as well on that card, and it's just awesome to see. So I really think that it helps in a big way to bolster essentially another league, if that makes sense. So getting this and moving the way they're moving with PFL, they have a window right here. because they're on borrowed time, essentially money wise. So from a business perspective, you have to make these moves. You have to make it start to pay off. You have to start to make it make sense. And what they're paying out these fighters is amazing to see, because this is what the UFC should have been doing a long time ago, honestly, I think, and paying these guys what they deserve. It's insane that I don't know if it's still 12-12 or if it's 24-24, I think maybe now. But I mean, still at the end of the day, 24-24 is kind of insane. You get 24 to show up, you get 24 to win. If you don't win, 24K is nothing. After you have to pay your fees to your gym, your manager, all of these different things, taxes, all of these things. That's just not sustainable to be a professional athlete. Is kind of crazy at the highest level. You get it if you're in a local promotion or one of these kind of mid-tier rotations or mid-tier promotions. But once you're at this level at the UFC, and I don't care if it's the lowest level of the UFC, prelim on a Vegas card, you should still be getting paid. I feel like pretty substantially, and at least have a base pay where you don't have to win to earn your entire purse. I just don't think in 2024, with the amount of revenue the UFC brings in, I just don't feel like that's quite right or accurate what they should be doing. And we'll never know what the locker room bonuses. We'll never know what the undisclosed money and what these guys get paid behind closed doors. It's not public. We'll never know. Some guys say it's enough. Some guys have went to other promotions and reasons for them leaving, and of course the whole sponsorship deal and not being able to have your own sponsorships when you go into the cage. It sucks to see at the end of the day. But UFC 300 is the last thing I'm going to touch on really quick, and that is already lining up to be a huge card. Calvin Kattar, Aljamain Sterling, as well as Yuri Prohaska versus Alexander Rakic. Charles Oliveira versus Arman. Man. I am not sure how to pronounce that man's name. Saryukin. And I honestly don't know if I've actually seen him fight. Anyways, going to be a great fight, though. Justin Gaethje versus Max Holloway BMF title. And Zhang Weili is going to defend her belt on this card versus Yan Shonen, and I think that one will be a really good fight as well, but I'm really pumped for Justin Gaethje versus Max Holloway. We will see what we're going to get for the main event. You have to feel like the main event is definitely not set in stone. Bo Nickel's going to be on this card. Davison Figueiredo versus Cody Garbrandt, and of course Jim Miller versus Bobby Green was just announced. Obviously the big speculation, UFC 300, if Conor McGregor is going to fight or not. And one thing that MMA On Point, speaking of MMA On Point, just to go back to my last kind of talking point, was they did a great video on the fighter pay and kind of the breakdown of like where the money goes after and why this is just not enough. They did a great video on that, but they also did a really good video recently talking about UFC 299 and how stacked 299 is. And that is to counter the Francis Ngannou and Anthony Joshua boxing bout that is going to go on the same night. Which is just, I don't know, it feels definitely very petty with UFC 300 coming up and you wanting to stack that top to bottom. But one thing that they did mention, maybe it's just going to be stacked top to bottom with no real, huge fight. And, we've seen out of these cards very big fights. Obviously, UFC 200 kind of hampered by, guys pulling out. John Jones' situation where he didn't get to fight. Conor McGregor and his whole deal and not having the rematch at UFC 200 with Nate Diaz. So it ended up being somewhat of a lackluster card, but it's still very important, I think. That was the coronation of Amanda Nunes that night. The featherweight championship bout obviously felt kind of, just because Conor had just taken the belt off of Aldo. Aldo was fighting Edgar. We had already seen this, so that made for kind of a lackluster matchup. Daniel Cormier versus Anderson Silva, obviously very exciting going into it. and turned out to be a rather boring fight with, of course, Cormier, out wrestling Anderson Silva for the better part of 3 rounds. Silva did get in a couple of really good shots, really good body kick there at the end. And UFC 100, absolutely stacked top to bottom. Brock Lesnar versus Frank Mir. You had GSP on that card versus Thiago Silva. Dan Henderson versus Michael Bisping in that huge knockout. I'm trying to just remember everybody on the cover, how they had them lined up. I really liked that cover. One of the best covers I think the UFC's ever done. And just showcasing everybody on the card. I feel like I'm missing a title fight, though. I feel like there was more than just the heavyweight and welterweight belts on the line. I might be wrong. But either way, amazing card up and down UFC 100. UFC 200 was supposed to be just as big. Obviously got riddled by, pullouts and, all kinds of crazy things going on. But UFC 300, it's going to be exciting. What do you think that they haven't announced yet? What do you think they're planning on for UFC 300 to see, who's going to be there? Who's going to be putting their titles on the line? Are there going to be any other title fights? Maybe a fairly quick turnaround for a Sean Strickland or Dricus Du Plessis. We shall see. So UFC 297 coming up tonight. Again, let me know who you got tonight, who's winning all of these fights. I really appreciate if you stuck around for the whole podcast. Give me a like and a subscribe or follow wherever you are listening at. Obviously, you can get the podcast on all of your favorite platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, as well as YouTube. I've got plenty of other stuff on YouTube as well. papashowknows.substack.com. And, we got the film reviews, other Chiefs podcasts right here, anywhere you're listening, as well as YouTube. And we'll see you next time we talk some MMA. So, again, one more time, drop down there who you got, Strickland or Du Plessis tonight.
Thank you.